The family head across to English Channel and back to Germany, where Ted instructs his troops on the art of gunnery and rocket launchers. Meanwhile, the boys find adventure in the forests and snowy switchbacks with their sledges. Chapter 6. Goodbye, Nana. The low-lying flat we moved to in a town called Hohne in Germany was bordered on a rich playground of forests. You could hear wild boar grunting their way around. The smell of pine needles stirred the nostrils while us lot continued to stir everything else. In the summer, as we crashed our way about the forests, blueberries left stains on our socks, and our lips were always blue. When the winter snow fell in late 1959, steep banks adjacent to our flat provided natural switchbacks for us daring boys to slip down. I can still see Betty in the kitchen overlooking the forest, humming away to the Force's Favorites radio program. Meanwhile, Nana was bedridden. Ted spent most of his time out on maneuvers, returning to us at odd times in his camouflage battle dress, like some endangered bird of prey. I was still pretty much alone for most of the time, but that wasn't going to last much longer. Boarding school was, for me, looming on the horizon. Evidence of this was clearly being demonstrated by Betty spending hours sewing name tags on my clothes. When my brothers were away at boarding school, I used to sneak into the American base where I went around begging for badges from the troops who lived in billets with a window looking out to the army camp. These guys would lean out, smoking Lucky Strikes with only their white vests on. Every time I asked for a badge, they replied, "You got a sister, son?" I always lied and always got a badge. Moving around so much left me wondering where home really was. I needed a measure, so decided that if I recognized something we owned that cropped up in a new house, I'd bless it in some weird way and keep an eye out for it. Betty's silver tea service was one such constant. It was right there in our great big lounge in Germany, along with the ever-present record player with a lid. The first ever pop record I wanted was a Bobby V song called Rubber Ball, which I played ad nauseum. But classical music constantly purred out of that record player, mostly opera. Ted always turned up the volume of Depths of the Temple from the Pearl Fishers. To this day, it is always present in my own collection. In swirls of chaos, my brothers suddenly came back for summer, instantly transforming the dynamic of our lives. Sean, our weapons specialist, somehow acquired a bag full of small copper-colored capsules filled with charges of gunpowder. You could chuck one at a wall, and it went off with a resounding bang. So up and down the flat stairwell, we would catapult these things at each other, so they went off as close to our heads as possible. These days we'd be incarcerated for meddling with such danger. But when that stock of excitement was exhausted, there was plenty more to keep us on the brink of anarchy. At the very top of our flat was a small attic with a single window facing the forest. If you were a sniper, that's where you'd station yourself. Mike was up there with the barrel of his .22 air rifle pointing outward. "Starlings," he whispered. "They're a menace." I immediately thought of Dennis the Menace from one of my comics. The plump creatures were filling their crops on fat cherries, while Sean and I, bracketed either side of Mike, stared ahead in anticipation. It was all I could do not to clap my hands in warning. But thwack! Shouting with triumph down the stairs we went. Another direct hit, and the bird, mortally wounded, flapped and quivered. Michael cocked the gun, took another pellet from his mouth and snapped the barrel shut. A muted shot later, and starling brains spilled onto the grass. Hungry for more, off my brothers went to stalk anything from a blue tit, a wren, or, if at all possible, some big game, a black crow. I would hang back and dig a quick grave. Perhaps I should have been a funeral director. Wherever I went, I seemed to be burying things behind people. The small village we lived in was near Bergen-Belsen, a place stained with the horrors of war. Often, in Ted's monster of a car named a Lee Francis, we drove past it. Being one of many tragic mass burial sites, it had a distinctly eerie atmosphere about it. At my age, it was impossible for me to understand its significance, but I do recall that not one bird could be seen anywhere nearby. I still wonder if that's true, but considering what happened there during the war, you can't blame them. During this time, I watched bits and pieces of the Adolf Eichmann trial on black and white television. He was protected behind a bulletproof screen, whilst victims came to tell their stories. There was lots of weeping going on, but he seemed unrepentant in his casual open-neck shirt. Whatever fate befell him, he deserved the worst. I still wonder what happened to all the birds there. Maybe Mike and Sean shot them all. Halfway along our long hallway lived Nana. She spent all her time in bed, and I used to carry meals to her on a tray. My old Nan was not well, and I spent hours and hours playing cards and coloring with her. One day, that precious old lady was also attacked by a heart. I was in the room when it happened. She suddenly looked at me, startled, mouth agape, grappling as the tray fell to the floor. I ran from the room, distraught at what I did not understand. Later, Betty told me it was an acute heart attack. That was a new one, acute. The thought of her attack being cute softened the blow. I began thinking there were lots of very sad things going on in life. I knew a lot about knots because I was a cub, but the little knot in my tummy was a hard one to undo. So I called it a granny knot, and that made it better because it kind of felt like she was still there. But my first taste of love was just around the corner, in Italy.